Well, we've got to a point in our study of Joshua where we are going to make some progress here. Sometimes we'll spend several weeks on one chapter of the Bible, but we're going to go through a couple of these next couple chapters like Bob drives. Quick, fast. No, don't do that. We may end up with some screaming, huh, Shirley? But quick, fast, and in a hurry anyhow. And the reason for that is, and I've said this along the way, by gleaming over these chapters, it's not to imply that there's not value or anything of great significance here. It had a lot more significance for the people who were living in the land, for the Israelites. And what we are doing is coming to the end of the conquering stage of Joshua. And we're going to start in chapter 12 here tonight. And we're going to divide the land up and give it for an inheritance. And so there's great detail given throughout these chapters. And it would have had richness to those whom it was originally written to, and like I mentioned before, to all those who were still living there. For us, these lands and names, it's hard to anchor them into place. I think when we think of the Promised Land, there's a handful of cities that we can place. Most of us can probably picture the Sea of Galilee, where Jerusalem was or is, where Jericho is, and Bethlehem for that matter, and some of those places. But the level of detail that is preserved in these chapters is a lot, and it would have had great meaning to them, but we're not going to spend a lot of time on it. Questions or comments? No. I want to reiterate the point of this book throughout. And that was, remember, the first several chapters is setting Joshua up to look like who? Who did he look like in the first 4 chapters? 5 chapters, really. Yeah, by design, he's to look like Moses. And so he does things very, in a very Mosaic way, if you will. He's presented that way, and he's declared to be the next leader of the people. And we, from there then, in chapter 6, went into the conquering. First off, chapter 6, 7, and 8 were kind of detailed into 2 battles. The one with Jericho and then the battle with Ai. And there was a lot of detail in that. And then after that, starting in chapter 8, well, chapter 8 is is it 8 or 9? Yeah, I was going to fib to you. Chapter 8, they actually conquer, 7 and 8 is Ai. Chapter 9 then is the only covenant they made with the group of people. It was the Gibeonites. And they were tricked into that. Do you remember how the Gibeonites got them to make a covenant with them? By wearing shabby clothes and saying, I'm from where? Far away, yeah. And so the people make a covenant with them, and they are the only people who are spared. Now, right before the fighting the conquest started, the angel of the Lord comes to Joshua, and what does he say to Joshua? What does Joshua say to the angel? Be chapter 5. The end of verse 13. What's he asking the angel? Yeah, are you for us or our enemies? What's the answer? No.
Oh.
Yeah, no. I'm not for you, and I'm not for your enemies. But I'm the commander of the Lord's army. It turns out it's not Joshua, right? And the point is that the most important thrust of this book is not that God is on Israel's side, but the question that's being asked, and this is the point that's going to be driven home probably next week, although it may be the week after, at the end of this book, is whose side are you on? Are you on God's side or not? It's not about whether God's on your side. It's whose side are you on? And Joshua understands that. I was getting my hair cut just a couple weeks ago, and a young lady cutting my hair said, "Would you like it faded or blocked in the back?" As she was coming around the back. And I said, "Yeah." And so she asked me again. I said, "Yeah, sure." and so she says, "Well, it was, I gave you an option. It's an either or question." And I say, "Exactly." and she says, "Okay, I'm going to fade it because that's what I like." I said, "Now you're catching on." And so I don't know. I don't look back there. But that's kind of the way that the angel of the Lord was here. Joshua says, "Are you for us or for them?" And the angel says, no. And he's answering a more complex question. So, especially in chapters 10, we see it a lot of times, 10 and 11, but the phrase that backs this up is, "And the Lord fought for Israel." And the Lord fought for Israel. And I have that highlighted throughout my Bible because in this particular book, because it's a thrust of this book. And it's the big point. In fact, Moses, God had said through Moses that I'm going to drive the people out in front of you as what? Remember what animal he chose? Hornets. I'm going to be like hornets before you and drive them out. And essentially that's what we see, that the people are going into battle and they lose against the Israelites over and over again. So chapter 12, as we turn our attention to chapter 12, the first half is kings defeated by Moses. And then the second half of that chapter is kings defeated by Joshua. And what this is a summary of all the things that had taken place. Remember, we ended last week in the end of chapter 11 with Joshua defeating the Anakim. And what were the Anakim? The giants. The very people who had intimidated and scared them away from the promised land to begin with. And so they're defeated. And so what we see in these chapters, in chapter 11 and 12, this statement's made a couple of times. And Joshua conquered all the land and did all that God had commanded him as Moses. So, here's my question. Is the work done? He did it all. There's a reason we're quiet, right? Because the two reasons, one might be we just have, we don't have a good idea of what happens next. But there's two other good reasons too. And that is that there's still more battles to come. And thirdly, when we get into the book of Judges, one of the first statements made in the first chapter is this is a problem because the people never did as God commanded them to do. Well, Joshua did all that he was commanded to do. And this is something that I've been looking into as I've went throughout this study, is you see that they left no living being here, no living being there, and no living being there. In chapter 14, Caleb's coming into some of those same areas, and he's fighting battles again. What's being said is the people were subdued. Right? The Israelites had control of the land. Was it completely finished? No, it wasn't finished. but they had control of the land. Now, at the risk of being political, most of us here probably remember a few years back where one of our presidents stood on an aircraft carrier. And what did his sign say? The sign was right behind him, wasn't it?
Accomplished.
Mission accomplished, that's right. Mission accomplished. And oh man, that haunted him for the rest of his presidency, right? Well, there was a sense in that was true, right? The big battles had been won, the land was subdued. Does that mean everything's over and there's no hot pockets or no people left? Absolutely not. And that's where we start to fall short, as I can understand it from reading Joshua and studying Joshua. The people are driving all these people out. We're going to see in verse 13, though, that God says, Joshua, you're old. You need to stop and divide up the land like I've told you to do. And then what Joshua does is tells the people, okay, the strongholds are taken care of. Remember, early in this book, we've had focus on cities, and we talked about the definition of city according to this language. He's taken all the strongholds out, and now it's time for each tribe to go and to finish driving the people out. And it seems to me that that's the part that never happens. Why is that? Because we can get comfortable once we have a place to live, right? Once we have land of our own. And sometimes it's hard to follow through and finish the job. And that's where it would seem these people fall short. Questions or comments? All right, with that then, let's start in chapter 13. And we're not going to read the whole chapter, but we'll look at verses 1 through 7. Would someone like to read that for me? Joshua 13, 1 through 7.
Joshua was old and stricken in years, and the Lord said unto him, Thou art old and stricken in years, and there remaineth yet very much land to be possessed. This is the land that yet remaineth, all the borders of the Philistines, and all Yeshuri, from Sihor, which is before Egypt, even unto the borders of Ekron northward, which is counted to the Canaanite. 5 lords of the Philistines, the Gazathites, and the Ashtothites, and the Eshkelonites, the Gittites, and the Ekronites, also the Avites. From the south, all the land of the Canaanites, and Mearah, that is beside the Sidonians, unto Aphek, to the borders of the Amorites. And the land of the Gibeonites, and the Lebanon toward the sun rising from Baal Gad unto Mount Hermon, unto the entering into Haman. All the inhabitants of the hill country from Lebanon unto Misrephothmaim, and all the Sidonians, them will I drive out from before the children of Israel. Only divide thou it by lot unto the Israelites for inheritance, as I have commanded thee. Now therefore divide this land for an inheritance unto the 9 tribes, and the half tribe of Manasseh.
Okay, thank you, Sir Kevin. I'm sorry about that. I should have had you read verses 1 and then 6 and 7. Gary, as a school teacher, there's some things you can do to diminish class participation. You did, you're right. Yes, sorry about that, but thank you for that, Kevin. And the parts that I wanted to bring out is this idea that God's saying to Joshua, Joshua, you're old, and wow, King James, I had missed that. That's a little harsh, stricken with years. ESV reads advanced in years, that the end result's still the same, but I don't know, advanced sounds a little easier to accept than stricken. And he says, but there's a lot left to do. However, I want you to stop, and he gives that long list of the areas that are still left to do. And by the way, it's not near as long as the list of chapter 12 of all the areas that were already conquered. But there's a lot to be done. But I'm going to drive the people out. I think one of the messages here for Joshua is, you don't have to do it. I'm going to do it. I, the Lord. He's been doing it all along. But again, there is a failure with following through on behalf of the people. In fact, we're going to see, I think tonight, how many of you are familiar with the altar of Ed? The altar of Big Ed, or the big altar of Ed. I think we're going to get there tonight. If they were as anxious to fight their enemies as they were each other, they'd probably have fared a lot better. But at any rate, 6 and 7, God says, I will drive them out, but you divide up the land. Now there's only 9 tribes left. What that means is that there were 2 tribes and a half, 2.5 tribes. That's why we're going, if you read through here, you'll read about the half tribe of Manasseh a lot. The 2 tribes, is it Benjamin and Gad? Should have had that highlighted. Okay, Reuben and Gad. Reubenites and Gadites are on the east side of Jordan. Remember, they had asked Moses, and there was a division that started at that point. And we're going to see it increase tonight, that division between them. And half the tribe of Manasseh stayed on the east side of Jordan. Although, all the warriors came and they fought the battle. And tonight we're going to see Joshua send them home. So now we have 9 tribes that we're going to divide this land amongst. Questions or comments? So, 13, chapter 13, you see, you may have an outline, or a headline rather, that last of that is those lands on the east side of Jordan that we just referenced. And then starting in chapter 14, we start to divide up the land on the east side. There's some issues with that. Caleb wants a particular piece of land, and he's granted it. Now, there is an interesting contrast here between Caleb and Joshua in chapter 14. Caleb says that I am as strong as the day I spied out the land. I'm looking for that's verse 11. I am still as strong today as I am in the day that Moses sent me in. My strength now is as my strength was then for war and for going and coming. I might be reading too much into this, but I think that was not the case for Joshua. They were similar in age, if not the same age. And we see God saying to Joshua, you're old, it's time to, you're stricken with years, it's time to not go into battle. And Caleb is saying, I'm as strong today as the day I crossed into the land. And so I'm going to go and I'm going to conquer this land. Again, what's interesting is this land that he's going to conquer has already been conquered. And we mentioned this before, but in my mind, what I think that means is the strongholds were defeated. The people fled into the hillsides and into the hill country and hid. And then when the battle was over, they came back down. So it was conquered, but yet there's still Canaanites in these lands. Questions or comments on that? Chapter 14. Like I said, Bob, we're grabbing gears here. We're going to keep it smashed to the floor. We're making progress. Yeah. Okay, chapter 15. We have the allotment for Judah. Chapter 16, you know, it's always the case. Someone's not happy, right? Joseph, and I love if you read this, and I'll leave it for you to read, the Ephraim and Manasseh, the half tribe of Manasseh and Ephraim, they say, hey, we are plenty of people. We have a lot of people. Why have you only given us one allotment? Oh my. Give free candy out, and there will be at least 3 people in a group of 5 that says, why is this all I got? Right? And that's what these people are doing. You can read it. I love Joshua's response to them. He says, you can have the hill country. He says, there's a lot of Canaanites up there yet. And Joshua says, didn't you tell me you need more land because you're a mighty people? Use your people and go get it, he essentially tells them. And so they work through all of that. Chapter 20 is the cities of refuge. Ernie's the expert on the cities of refuge. But there are cities within these inheritance, 2 separate groups of cities, cities of refuge and cities of Levites. Chapter 20 is the cities of refuge, and chapter 21 is the cities of Levites. The cities of refuge was for someone who accidentally killed someone, unintentionally killed them. The old law essentially is an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. And so if you accidentally killed someone, say the head came off your axe and flew back and caught Scotty, killed him. Sorry, Scott. Price of visiting, I guess. And I didn't mean to. Well, his relatives have the right to kill me, to stone me. But it wasn't murder. What I could do is flee to the city of refuge and make my case at the gate to the judges or elders at the gate, and assuming they believed that it was unintentional, I could live there until the high priest, the current high priest, died. Then I could go home, and no one was allowed to harm me. And so those cities are throughout the land. Questions or comments on the cities of refuge? About scratching?
Well, I do have a question. Lands, and they could have done different ways from allotments, pulled lots, or go from what they did or whatever. But I was just wondering, is some of them like seamen, where they had ports and get goods from there because they wanted it, or stuff like that. I don't know. I was just kind of wondering who wanted what and why they wanted it.
Yeah.
So it's just a thought process I was thinking.
It seems to be a mixture of the two. The tribes on the east side of Jordan, they said, this is land we want. And they wanted that even before they went in and saw what God had promised them.
Near the sea for
the opposite side.
Opposite side, okay.
Yeah, the opposite side. So there's not seaports there, obviously.
Is it farmland?
There is farmland there. I don't know how much.
Commodities and stuff like that, where if they have lots of people, you need lots of stuff to establish food, water, and stuff like that.
Their primary source of living was agriculture.
Okay.
That was their primary. They weren't real big in trading at this time. Not saying it didn't happen, but at this time they were agricultural primarily. Of course, later the Sea of Galilee, probably very immediately once it was settled, Sea of Galilee becomes a huge resource. So most of it's done by lots. So he pulls the people in, sends them out to survey the land, 3 people from each tribe that's left. They survey the land, divide it, and then they draw lots. That's how most of it's done.
I'm almost positive I read someplace where they were to divide the land up by the size of the tribes. More land for more people. I can't find it. I know I've read, well, it's like anything. Godliness is next to cleanliness. Maybe it's not in there. I thought I read that before, and I guess my question is, when I read it, it almost seemed to me that the numbers of Benjamin were almost the size of the numbers of Manasseh, yet Manasseh got like 20 times the size of land.
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah, but at the time, I don't know where I read it at now, but I can't find it, but I know I read it someplace.
Yeah. I don't recall that. Of course, Joshua is what's most fresh in my mind. I don't recall seeing that in Joshua. And that may be. That's essentially the case that Joseph's tribes are making, that, hey, we've got lots of people, we need more land. But Joshua doesn't seem to buy into that in that case. Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah, there are a lot of things you can look into with, who got the mineral rights? It's a good question. That ends up being important centuries later, doesn't it? So those cities of refuge are chapter 20. The one tribe who didn't get any land is who? Levi. Now I say didn't get any land, it's almost true. They didn't get a lot. God's their inheritance is what is phrased here in Joshua. But they were given certain cities and the pasture land. And that's what chapter 21 is. And that's done by lots. What cities are going to be given to the Levites. And so they have these cities inside the land. Questions or comments? All right. Who is prone to jumping to conclusions here? Just me?
What's the question?
I believe Ernie is not. Who is prone to jumping to conclusions? Any of you? Okay, Gary and I are. A few hands are going up. You know what? I mean, I guess you guys are blowing. I can't even argue. Yeah, maybe I'm the one right away raised my hand up. I proved it's true. I'm quick to jump to conclusions. That's what we're going to see in chapter 22. And I think chapter 22 is a great lesson in not jumping to conclusions. We have a ministers' meeting in Indiana each month, and each month one of the ministers gives a lesson from different areas. And John spoke from the latter part of this last month on jumping to conclusions, and there are some great examples for that. Gary, you thought you were going to be the blunt of a joke by raising your hand, but I just assumed we all jumped to conclusions. Turns out it's just Gary and I. Then, would someone read 1 through 9 for us? Chapter 22, 1 through 9. We're done speeding through those chapters, by the way. Coming back down from warp speed here. Everyone's afraid now, Kevin, so I'll read the next one. In that time Joshua summoned the Reubenites and the Gadites and the half-tribe of Manasseh and said to them, "You have kept all that Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded you and have obeyed my voice in all that I've commanded you. You have not forsaken your brothers these many days down to this day, but have been careful to keep the charge of the Lord your God. And now the Lord your God has given rest to your brothers as he promised them. Therefore turn and go to your tents in the land where your possession lies. And Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave you on the other side of the Jordan. Only be careful to observe the commandments and the laws that Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded you, to love the Lord your God and to walk in all of his ways and to keep his commandments and to cling to him and to serve him with all your heart and with all of your soul." So Joshua blessed them and sent them away, and they went to their tents. Now the one half of the tribe of Manasseh, Moses had given a possession in Bashan, but to the other half, Joshua had given a possession beside their brothers in the land west of the Jordan. And when Joshua sent them away to their homes and blessed them, he said to them, "Go back to your tents and with much wealth, and with very much livestock and silver and gold and bronze and iron, and with much clothing. Divide the spoil of your enemies with your brothers." So the people of Reuben and the people of Gad and the half-tribe of Manasseh returned home, parting from the people of Israel at Shiloh, which is in the land of Canaan, to go to the land of Gilead, their own land, of which they had possessed themselves by the command of the Lord through Moses. So everyone else is on the west side of the Jordan River, except we're going to call it 3 tribes, 2.5 tribes, except these 3 tribes, and their commitment's full. Joshua says, go home, take your spoils with you, and just remember, keep the law, right? Don't forsake it, and follow after the Lord your God full-heartedly. And so they're going back home. Now, I mentioned this before, back in Numbers 32, if I'm not mistaken, we see that when they requested this, Moses' response is like, are you intentionally insulting God? Yeah, it's God saying, here, I have this for you. And they're saying, no, I want that instead. And so there's this rift that starts to take place at that point. But now they're going home and all is good. Questions or comments? Leslie, by the way, I didn't see when you jumped in there, but it's good to have you along. Thanks for being with us. Verses 10 and 10 through 20. Would someone like to read those for us?
Joshua 22.
Yep.
And when they came unto the border of Jordan, that are in the land of Canaan, the children of Reuben and the children of Gad and the half-tribe of Manasseh built there an altar by the Jordan, a great altar to see to. And the children of Israel heard, saying, Behold, the children of Reuben and the children of Gad and the half-tribe of Manasseh have built an altar over against the land of Canaan in the borders of Jordan at the passage of the children of Israel. And when the children of Israel heard of it, the whole congregation of the children of Israel gathered himself together at Shiloh to go up to war against them. And the children of Israel sent unto the children of Reuben and to the children of Gad and to the half-tribe of Manasseh into the land of Gilead, Phinehas the son of Esther the priest, and with 10 princes of each chief, housed a prince throughout all the tribes of Israel, and each one was a head of the house of their fathers among the thousands of Israel. And they came unto the children of Reuben and to the children of Gad and to the half-tribe of Manasseh unto the land of Gilead, and they spake with them, saying, Thus saith the whole congregation of the Lord, What trespass is this that ye have committed against the God of Israel, to turn away this day from following the Lord, in that ye have built you an altar, that ye might rebel this day against the Lord? Is the iniquity of pure too little for us, from which we are not cleansed unto this day? Although there was a plague in the congregation of the Lord, that ye must turn away this day from the following the Lord, and it will be seen ye rebel today against the Lord. What tomorrow ye will be wroth with the whole congregation of Israel. Notwithstanding, if the land of the possessions be unclean, then pass ye over unto the land of possession of the Lord. Therein the Lord's tabernacle dwelleth, and that possesses among us, but rebel not against the Lord, nor rebel against us, and building you an altar beside the altar of the Lord our God. Did not Achan the son of Zerah commit a trespass in the accursed thing? And wrath fell on all the congregation of Israel, and that man perished not alone in his iniquity.
Okay, thank you. So, first things first, let's get this altar out of the way. Verse 10. And Bob, I didn't pick up what the King James calls it. An altar, what's the last phrase? An altar of what? Verse 10. I didn't hear you.
A great altar.
A great altar? Okay. I didn't catch that. So a great altar. Imposing size. Impossible size. Okay. Yeah, so this huge altar is what they have built. This isn't the normal altar that you would use. Now, I need someone from the King James to read verse 24 for me. Has to be King James, or everything falls apart on me right here.
The cure of this thing, saying,
I'm sorry, Bob. Let me stop you there. I'm blind. Verse 34, if you would. Yeah, the end of the chapter.
And the children of Reuben and the children of Gad called the altar Ed, for it shall be a witness between us that the Lord is God.
All right. So what's the altar called? Ed. And what kind of altar is it? Big. It's the altar of Big Ed. Right? Now, the reason it had to be King James is ESV reads witness. And yeah, it's an interpretation issue there. They're calling this altar witness, but ends up in the King James being Ed. So Big Ed. Big Ed's causing some big problems, isn't he? So what takes place is the Gad and Reuben and half-tribe Manasseh, they go back over. First thing they do is build this huge altar. Now, what's interesting to me is the people seem to have learned some very valuable lessons, some lessons that seemed they would never learn. And that is, if we rebel against God, things aren't going to go well. If you notice what they say to when the rest of the tribes come over, what they say is, what are you doing? Don't you know that if you do this, it's not just you that's going to pay the price, we are going to pay the price. And they give at least 3 examples that they experienced. By the way, they would have been young when their parents were making these mistakes, and they lived through it. They're saying, we're not going to do the same thing. No way. Now, here's what's interesting. Number 1, they learned a lesson. Number 2, here's what's really interesting to me. Have you ever thought you got a hold of something, finally understood something, you did more harm with your increased knowledge and understanding than you did when you were ignorant? I have. Anytime I try to do anything mechanical, Eddie, tell me how to fix something, I'm going to do more damage now than I did before you told me how to fix it, I promise. Right? That's what they did with their knowledge. Immediately, they go to war. Now, they don't start the war, but they march over ready for war because they learned we can't rebel against God. You've probably caught on by now because of where we started that we're jumping to conclusions. Right? So I'll read for time's sake, starting in verse 21. Then the people of Reuben, the people of Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh said in answer to the heads of the families of Israel, the mighty one, God, the Lord, the mighty one God, the Lord, he knows. And let Israel itself know. If it was in rebellion or in breach of faith against the Lord, do not spare us today. We're just going to pause there for a second. What do they say? The Lord knows, and let Israel know that if this was done in rebellion, don't spare us. We deserve to die. And I think this is important because it's so often, I find it in my life on both sides, people making accusations against me and me making accusations against other people. Be careful when you say they're doing that because. Be careful. Be careful. And it happens all the time. That's what the 10 tribes have done here. Here's what they go on to say about the altar. For building an altar to turn away from following the Lord, or if we did so to offer burnt offerings or grain offerings or peace offerings on it, may the Lord himself take vengeance. For 24, no, but we did it from fear that in time to come your children might say to our children, what have you to do with us, the Lord, the God of Israel? For the Lord has made the Jordan a boundary between us and you, you people of Reuben and people of Gad. You have no portion in the Lord, so your children might make our children cease to worship the Lord. Let me ask you this. Did Reuben, Gad, and Manasseh make assumptions too? Jump to conclusions? Yeah. They said, we built this because we think that your children might say to our children, you're on the other side of Jordan, you have no part with us, and cause our children to quit worshiping the Lord. Here's the bottom line, because we're out of time. Read the rest of the chapter. They say we built it to remind everyone about the altar of the Lord. It wasn't to offer sacrifices on. It's a memorial. Oh, that ties in, doesn't it, for this coming week? It was a memorial to keep our remembrance straight.
Fact that they're supposed to get it according to their size, but they didn't keep that.
They didn't keep that.
I can't see, because Benjamin had 45,000 and Manasseh only had 52,000.
Okay.
It's not a big difference.
Now. Well, I'm glad he's worked hard to get that for us. So, and thank you, because I was unaware of that. That was Numbers 26. Numbers 26. So, I'm sure you did. Thank you. Thank you for that. So, the breach is taken care of. Israel's happy with that answer, and they say, in fact, this is evidence we know God's amongst us. This has all went well. Be careful jumping to conclusions. Thank you very much. Lord willing, next week we'll start in 23, and there's a possibility we might finish 23 and 24 next week.